Severe weather is returning over the next 2 days for over 50 million Americans, bringing the widespread risk for damaging winds, a couple isolated areas where large to very large hail will be possible, plus a few tornadoes being possible out in the Midwest. I'm going to break down everything that you need to know so that you can stay safe and you can stay weather aware as we roll through the second half of this week. So let's get right into the forecast. Rolling in today's convective outlook, we do have a level 3 out of 5 enhanced risk in place, not far from Denver, out near the tri-state region of Nebraska, Kansas, and Colorado. We're also looking at a larger slight risk extending all the way up through Wisconsin, back towards Lake Michigan, all the way back towards Cheyenne, Wyoming, and the Rockies as well. We do have a marginal risk in place back in North Carolina and Virginia, where some gusty winds are possible, and a much larger marginal risk all the way back through the Great Basin, through the Midwest, the Central Plains, even into the Northern Plains, into the West as well. Our primary corridor for tornado risk is going to be throughout southeastern Minnesota and a large portion of both Iowa and Wisconsin. I definitely also would not rule out an isolated tornado near the tri-state area of Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado, but that's much more of a conditional risk, something very low probability that I'm not exactly expecting, but I just wouldn't entirely rule it out. But we do have that 2% risk for Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. Wind is going to be the most significant event for tonight, as we do have a smaller 5% risk for our marginal risk out in North Carolina and Virginia, but the meat and potatoes of today's event extends all the way from Virginia back through the Central Plains, even out towards the Great Basin and clipping the Northern Plains in Montana. But of course, the main area of concern is going to be in those yellows, reds, and that hatched region, more specifically out near the tri-state region of Kansas, Nebraska, and Colorado, where we're seeing that 30% risk for wind damage. You're also going to see that SIG 1 hatched region there that includes Denver and a lot of surrounding areas, including Cheyenne, Wyoming as well. So a lot of areas included in the risk for a large scale damaging wind bag this evening. Our risk for hail is much more conditional today, but because we do have a lot of low level moisture and pretty steep low level lapse rates, it wouldn't shock me to see an isolated hailstone or two reach those severe thresholds, maybe getting up towards around 2 inches at most. I wouldn't expect anything to get particularly damaging today, but we could definitely see a couple of larger hailstones with these storms, most specifically with initial convection back towards really the Cheyenne, northeastern Colorado, and Nebraska Panhandle region. As we look forward into Thursday, things get a little bit more interesting to me. We do have a very, very expansive region here that is within a marginal risk, all the way from Maine back through the Ohio Valley, down through the Central Plains, and then stretching back up through the Dakotas into the Northern Plains. So a very, very large region in place. We're looking at mostly a wind-driven event back off the Front Range, as we are expecting some stronger storms to develop with those stereotypical types of hazards with them, those small to medium-sized hail that could be reaching severe thresholds, plus those wind-driven events that could be producing those 60, maybe 70 mile per hour damaging gusts. Back towards Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, and Kentucky, though, we are possibly going to see an MCV develop. Now, the exact timing, location, and development of this is a little bit uncertain still, but we are looking at the potential for another one of those Illinois type of days that we've seen in 2026 a lot, as they've gotten all sorts of tornadoes. Now, there is not a tornado probabilistic outlook on the map right now, but it wouldn't shock me to see one get introduced by tomorrow morning, given that we're going to have that MCV setup that has overperformed for a large portion of 2026. Back in the Mid-Atlantic, we also have a 1 out of 5 marginal risk in place down towards Arizona and New Mexico. Same deal. Both of those are just going to be for wind-driven events as well. Thursday is going to be primarily a wind day again, as that's kind of the common theme here this summer. But what we are going to be seeing is that conditional tornado risk for Thursday as well. So I don't want to glaze over that and not mention it. And here's just a quick look at how we don't have a tornado probabilistic outlook issued for tomorrow. If we did get one, it would probably be something along the lines of this magenta circle, which again is an area we've seen a lot of tornadic threat over this year in 2026. And if you want to follow along with this, you can do so at our website. The link is in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen now, as we could be seeing a shaded in green area for a 2% risk, maybe even a brown area for a 5% risk introduced by tomorrow as the forecast becomes a little bit more confident. As I mentioned, wind is going to be the primary concern. We have 5% risks for Arizona, New Mexico, and the Mid-Atlantic. We're also seeing literally everywhere that is within a risk zone is going to be including a wind risk, all the way from Maine down through the Ohio Valley, through the Missouri Valley, into the Central Plains and the Northern Plains. Those yellow areas are going to be your 15% risk zones. That's where we're going to be expecting the most significant concern for those elevated damaging winds that could be producing 60, maybe 70 mile per hour wind gusts, capable of dealing some damage, especially off the Front Range back in this region towards Nebraska, South Dakota, Wyoming, Colorado, Kansas, that type of region. Our hail risk for tomorrow is going to be mostly limited to right off of the Front Range, as we are going to be looking at the area of the Nebraska Panhandle, South Dakota, eastern Wyoming, and a large portion of eastern Colorado as our primary risk for hail. I wouldn't rule out some larger hailstones a little bit further east as storms begin to propagate eastward, especially with any storms that can remain semi-discrete and initiate those stronger updrafts. But it's definitely a lower probability and a more conditional system in order to get some of those larger hailstones. So not a huge hail concern for tomorrow, mostly looking at a wind and possibly a tornado or two back towards the Illinois region for tomorrow. Finally, as we roll into Friday, we are going to be looking at a large marginal risk in place all the way from the plains back through the Ozarks, even into the Tennessee Valley, where the primary concern is going to be wind damage, but there is a lot of uncertainty in the forecast. Either way, I'm not expecting Friday to be a big severe weather day by any stretch, but definitely in that shaded in darker green zone, we could definitely be seeing some wind gusts get to that 60-mile-per-hour threshold to reach severe marks. So definitely something to pay close attention to for Friday, but not something of extreme concern. Let's go ahead and hop right into the timing for today's severe weather. We are going to be watching some storms begin to develop all over the place again, always in the southeast. In the summertime, we're going to be seeing all sorts of these air mass storms in the afternoon and early evening hours. But what you will see is that by 6 p.m., we've got all sorts of storms developing back off the Front Range and then all the way through the Midwest. We're out in Iowa here, in northern Iowa especially. That's where my greatest concern is for the tornadic potential this evening. I think the parameters align the best there, and we'll get into that in just a little bit. But we are going to be watching those storms develop. And as we continue forward in time through this evening, you are going to see those storms begin to cluster up and also back with a little bit of a linear system rolling through Kansas. At that point, we'll be looking at more of that possible windbag scenario with a couple of MCS events possible, just those clusters of thunderstorms that could be producing those strong damaging winds, just those general bowling ball storms that like to plow on through. We've seen a lot of them in South Dakota recently. And then as we get into the Midwest, we're also going to be seeing about the same thing going on with more organization as we get into the later evening hours. This is by 10 p.m. And then as we roll into the overnight hours, what you're going to see is that line continue to propagate eastward with a lot of scattered showers and storms in and around it. This is by 3 a.m. here. So rolling through southern Iowa and Kansas, still some stronger storms possible within there, could reach severe thresholds. Not really anything that's particularly dangerous, but definitely could be severe in nature. Still going to have storms rolling through Michigan by the AM hours. This is by 8 a.m. now. And then some residual thunderstorms with that cold front as it continues to roll on into the Ozarks and Missouri. And then as we keep pushing forward in time by 1 p.m. here, you are going to see that all of these general storms are going to have completely dissipated. We'll be looking at more scattered storms popping up in the southeast and back towards the East Coast also, as we see every single day in the summer. And then we'll be looking ahead towards Thursday evening setup. And as we roll forward into Thursday afternoon and evening setup, you're going to see all these storms pop up like crazy with our possible MCV scenario going on in Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, even into Kentucky. We'll also see more of those storms firing off back in the mid-Atlantic with our larger line of storms back off the Front Range, which could be producing that risk for some wind damage and some hail as well. So this is by 6 p.m. And as we roll forward in time into the overnight hours, or into the later evening hours, I should say, this is by 10 p.m. here, we're going to be seeing some stronger storms clustered up, plowing on through southern Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, even Kentucky, eventually rolling towards Tennessee. And our main line of storms back off the Front Range is going to be pushing into western Kansas, towards central Nebraska, even through Rapid City, South Dakota as well. Possibly even lingering storms all the way as far south as the Oklahoma Panhandle towards Amarillo and even Lubbock, Texas. And then as things continue to roll off, we are going to see that by 3 a.m. here on Friday, we're just going to have a cluster of general thunderstorms continuing to roll through Kentucky and Tennessee, which could have some severe potential for damaging winds. It just is a little more conditional. Scattered storms all over the place throughout the Northeast as well, even back through the Ohio Valley. Some more storms in the northern plains, and the residual storms from our line will still be rolling through Kansas. The exact location of these is a little bit uncertain on exactly where things are going to end up by 3 a.m. Friday, but this is the latest run of the HRRR. Now, something that does spark my interest for tonight's severe weather is looking at these updraft swaths that do appear, especially up here in northern Iowa. This is going to be my primary area of concern for severe weather, and it's interesting that the model is even aligning with that on its simulated composite reflectivity. So essentially just where it thinks storms are going to fire off and where they're going to be the strongest. since it's also aligning with some of these mesoscale parameters I'm about to show you. The first of those parameters is going to be our mixed layer CAPE, which you are going to see is shooting up like crazy at around 5 p.m., where we're going to have all sorts of instability going on in the mixed layer, especially throughout southern Minnesota. And as those storms track into northern Iowa, that's where the greatest concern for me is going to be for them to be tornadic in nature. Our LCL heights are going to tell a little bit of a similar story, as you are going to see here by 8 p.m. We have all sorts of lower LCL heights going on throughout southeastern Minnesota, central Wisconsin, and northern Iowa. Now, by 8 p.m., a lot of this is going to be right behind our storms. But if we go back in time by a couple of hours, you are going to see that these LCL heights, even by 5 p.m. here for the same regions, are decently conducive for some lower surface-based supercells that could become tornadic. Now, as you get anywhere into those oranges and those deeper yellows, those are going to be areas that are not quite as favorable, but those blues and grays especially are going to be more favorable. So any storm that can become a little bit more surface-based is definitely going to have an easier time trying to become tornadic. Now, as we look at our 0 to 3 kilometer storm relative helicity, a couple of models, including the 12Z HRRR, which is what we're looking at now, are suggesting some localized areas where updrafts will be stronger. You're going to see some of those magentas getting into the mix there, where lots of spin will be available for individual updrafts associated with this cluster or just out ahead of this cluster. So that's one of the concerns as well for the possible development of tornadoes. And that's mainly the reason that northern Iowa is my greatest concern for that. One limiting factor that we do have in place this evening is that our 0 to 6 kilometer bulk shear is not going to be that strong. You are going to see there's some value sneaking up there, especially as these storms begin to pass. Those are more localized areas where shear is enhanced due to storm motion. But in general, this is by 9 p.m. here, and this is the most shear that we're really seeing in this environment. So not a lot of shear available to these storms. And finally, we are in the Midwest in the middle of summer. It's corn sweat season. And by 9 p.m., you're still going to see tons of moisture dew points in the upper 60s, even getting into the 70s in some areas. You're also going to see moisture coming out of the south and winds coming out of the south at the surface, which could lead to more laminar surface flow for inflow. So essentially, the more southeasterly these winds become, the more favorable it will be for a supercell or a semi-discrete cell to become tornadic in this environment. So this is by 9 p.m. here. We're still looking at some pretty favorable conditions at the surface. So we can definitely see the risk for tornadoes run into around 9, 10, maybe even 11 p.m. this evening. And that's going to take us to the end of today's forecast. We will be going live tonight and Thursday night and possibly Friday. So a lot to cover. We'll be going live to make sure that you can stay safe and stay weather aware. So make sure you're subscribed and have notifications turned on. We're also going to be having a couple storm chasers out in the field possibly tonight and tomorrow. So definitely something to look out for with our broadcast. But thank you so much for trusting Will Bratton WX as your source for trusted weather information. Stay safe out there, and we'll see you soon.